We're recording.
Okay. Hi, and welcome to our first Math for Teachers 2 team meeting. We are going to discuss Chapter 8, Algebraic Reasoning, Graphing, and Connections with Geometry. And my name is Sarah Vinick.
I'm Courtney Snyder.
I'm Demia Hendricks.
And I'm Taylor Richardson.
What does this graph represent?
Okay, this graph shows us how many miles a vehicle travels when they are going, let's say, to state. So we start out with a full tank of gas. We'll say it's 28 gallons. So they start out with 28 gallons of gas, and you can see as the distance increases, your fuel decreases. And you can see at one point, the graph stops and it goes straight up in a vertical line. What that represents is that they have stopped and they are refueling. And as soon as they refuel, they have those 28 gallons of gas again. They're on their way, and it shows once again that downward slope, which represents the distance is increasing and the fuel is decreasing. All right, what are the X and Y axis? And is there more you can tell me by looking at the X and Y axis?
The X and Y axes are your base axes of the graph that you are dealing with. The x-axis is the horizontal line that goes right through the middle of the graph, and the y-axis similarly is the vertical line that goes right through the middle of the graph. This graph in particular, you can tell by the labels on the x and y-axis. You can tell that the y-axis represents the gallons of gas that the truck can hold and is holding, and the x-axis represents the miles that the truck has driven with that gas. Why does the bounce ball's height get lower the farther down the graph it goes?
Okay, let's say, for example, you're bouncing a ball down a hallway. When you bounce the ball, it's going to have the most force at the very beginning. So it's going to bounce on the floor and bounce right back up into the air really high. The farther it goes down the hallway, the less force it's going to use. So as it shows here on the graph, the height is going to get lower and lower the farther it goes down because it doesn't have as much force. And eventually it will just stop bouncing and start rolling, and there'll be no height to it at all. Why does the flagpole graph make the U shape?
Okay, so each graph you have, it has a different scenario. And for this particular one, you're basing it off of the shadow, which is caused by the sun. So once you do this, when the flagpole is just the shadow that it makes the U shape. What is a variable in an equation?
A variable in any equation is any piece of information that is unknown or has yet to be solved. In this case, with these two equations that were given, the variable is the letter x. We can replace this variable with different numbers as shown so that we can help find the answer to each equation. Where do you put the value for x into the equation?
The value for x can be any number that you want it to be. In this case, we have the numbers 0, 1, 2, and 3. So we're given the function f of x equals 3x, and we're wanting to know if x was to equal 1, what would the answer be for this equation? Pretty much f of x equals y. So we're going to plug 1 into anywhere that we see the letter x. So we'll plug it in over here, and 3 times x would be 3. So f of 1 would be 3. What is a function, and how are variables related to one?
A function is an equation or relationship with at least one variable. Each input with that variable will produce only one output. If it produces more than one output, it is not an equation. Variables are used in order to find one or more answers that can work with that equation. How does a function machine work?
So a function machine, we have an input and an output. We are given our input, or x, equals 0, 1, 2, and 3. And our rule is multiply by 3 and add 8. So when we take 0, multiply by 3, we get 0, add 8, we get 8. So our x and y would be 0, 8. When we do 1, we get 11, 2, we get 14, and 3, we get 17. What is the difference between g of x equals g of f of x and f of x equals f of g of x?
The difference is you just reverse it. So when you're calculating for f of x, it's just the reverse of what you did for g of x. How can you find the slope? Sorry, it's not showing. How can you find the slope of a line when given 2 points?
You can find the slope of a line when given 2 points by using the slope formula or by finding the rise over the run. The 2 points we are given here are 3, 1, and 5, 5. By using the slope formula, which is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, we can find that 5 minus 1, or y2 minus y1, equals 4, and 5 minus 3, or x2 minus x1, equals 2. And we know that 4 over 2 is equal to 2, so we know that the slope is 2 over 1. Explain why the line is vertical.
Okay, so whenever we have a vertical line, it means that we either have a 0 or an undefined answer for the slope. So whenever we take our points and we put it into the slope formula, we get a negative 8 minus 8, which gives us a negative 16, and a 5 minus 5 is 0. And as we know, we cannot do this step. Negative 16 divided by 0, if you try to do it on a calculator, you get an error. It's just something we can't do. You can't divide a number by 0. So therefore, it is undefined, and we get a vertical line with no slope. What are the coordinates, and how do I graph them?
Coordinates are a set of two numbers that can be placed on a graph, or also called a coordinate plane. These set of numbers are given, you're given an x and a y. Your first number is the x, and the second number is a y. And the way to graph them on a coordinate plane, when you get your coordinate plane, you're going to have an x-axis that goes left and right or horizontally, and your y-axis that goes up and down, which is vertical. And they're going to be numbered going right on the x-axis is going to be positive, left is going to be negative, up is positive, and down is negative. So to graph it, we're going to start with the first number, which is negative 1. And we are going to move to the left on the x-axis because it is negative 1. So we go negative 1 on the x-axis, and then we go down 4, going negative onto the y-axis. And then that is where your point will be plotted. Can you tell me what kind of slope a segment has by looking at it?
You can tell what kind of slope any segment has just by looking at it. When you look at this slope on the left, you can see that it is moving to the left, but in a downward motion. We know that that slope is negative because it is moving in a downward motion. And we look at the graph on the right, we can see that the line is straight up and down. And we know that any line that is straight up and down, or slope that is straight up and down, is undefined. What happens if the denominator of the slope formula is 0?
It's undefined. So basically, if you look at the last picture on the right side, you see that we have it set up in the slope-intercept form, and then you end up with a 0 in the denominator, and so you see that it makes it a straight line if you connect the two dots. How do we know the points are going to make a straight line?
When you're making a linear equation, your formula is y equals mx plus b. When you look over here at our function, we have f of x equals x squared. We have a y and we have an x, but we don't have an m or a b to make that linear equation or straight line. So when we're graphing this, we know that it's not going to be coming out as a straight line. Why are the lines similar?
Okay, so we can tell that they are close to the same. The only thing that's really changing is that the line is either going up or down on the graph. And that's because when we're given the value of x, we can plug that into the formulas that were given to us, and we're going to get a different value. And that's going to change where the line lays at on the graph. What is the difference between the graphs?
Between the graphs are different on the y-intercept. So if you were to plot each one, every time you plot a different one, it'll follow on a different spot on the y-intercept, on the y-axis. What's the difference between a perpendicular line and a parallel line?
A perpendicular line are any two lines that cross each other only in one spot and create a 90-degree angle at that intersection between those two lines. The difference between that and a parallel line, a parallel set of parallel lines are two lines that run right next to each other, like these two bold lines, for instance, on your coordinate plane. They run right next to each other, but they never touch or share any same point at any given time. How do you find the slope?
Okay, so to find the slope, we need to use the point slope form. And here we're given negative 3/4 x plus 5, and we have 1 point, 6 comma negative 1. So by using that, we can plug it into the formula, and we're going to end up with a positive 4/3 minus 9. And anytime that you do that, you're going to flip the m value, because it would be y equals mx plus b. So the m value, you're going to reciprocate the whatever number you're given. If it's negative, it becomes positive, and if it's positive, it becomes negative. So we're going to end up with a positive 4/3 minus 9. And to check your work, all you're going to do is substitute your value for x, which here is 6, into the equation, and we're going to get a negative 1. And as you can see, it says y equals negative 1. We can check it by looking at our point. We have 6 comma negative 1, so therefore we know that our slope is correct. How do we get an equation into y equals mx plus b if it is all mixed up?
To be able to find the slope of a line, we need it to be in y equals mx plus b format. Now this equation right here is not in that format, so to be able to get it, we want to set the values to y. So to do that, we are going to pretty much do the exact opposite of what this is to get it moved over here. So here we would add 5 to both sides, and then we would subtract 9 from both sides. So then we'd have 2y equals negative 9 plus 5, and our negative 9x plus 5. And then we would divide it all by 2, and our answer would be y equals negative 9 over 2x plus 5 over 2. What is the perpendicular slope for an equation that is y equals negative 3/4 x plus 5?
It will be 4/3 because you're flipping it and you're taking the negative of it. So since it's already negative, once you flip it, you'll have negative 4/3. And then if you take the opposite of it, it'll be 4/3. What is a tangent line?
A tangent line is a line that touches the outside of the circle on the graph. We can see here the two red lines on the top and on the bottom are both tangent lines represented on this graph. In the question we're given the point 0, negative 9, so we know that that is the outermost point of the circle, and that is where the tangent line would go. Will I always have the given circle?
Yes, you'll always need the given circle to be able to tell where to identify the coordinate planes, the coordinates of the center, sorry. Explain the equation of the line that is tangent to the circle of radius 9 at point 0, negative 9, and whose center is at the origin.
Okay, and as we know, the center is always the origin. And we have one point, which is 0, negative 9, and we know the radius is 9. Using that information, we can plug it into the tangent line equation. When we do that, we get a negative 9. So we know that that's where the tangent line is going to be. We're going to have a 0, negative 9, and then we're going to have a 9, 0, and that's where we're going to find the tangent lines. And remember, a tangent line is a line that only touches the circle's outer, like the outer circle, and only once.
All right, now that's the end of our video. Thank you for watching.